Should the Giants be concerned about losing their two coordinators? What about contracts for Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley? Those and more questions on today's Twitter Tuesday edition of the Locked On Giants podcast coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Pick projection, you can win up to 10 times the amount of your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's all caps, by the way. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. What is good, New York Giant fans? Welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Traina, your host, and today is a Twitter Tuesday. So as usual, you guys sent in some great questions, about 24 questions, actually. So we're going to cover all those questions here on today's show. So thank you again for tuning in, for taking an interest in the Locked On Giants podcast, and for the fantastic questions. Let's not waste any time because we got a lot to cover on this show. Let's get right into it. All right, we're going to kick it off with Alan Yudman, who asks, here speculating, but the more interviews Mike Kafka gets, the more likely he is to get a job. Who could replace him as offensive coordinator? All right, Alan, thank you so much for kicking the questions off with that good one. If you're talking internally, I got to think Shea Tierney might be a candidate. Probably he would be the only candidate, I think, internally. But, you know, if Mike Kafka leaves, Brian Daboll can hire from the outside if he wants. He can, of course, promote Shea Tierney if he wants. And, listen, I know a lot of people are wringing their hands in worry about Mike Kafka leaving. I would be surprised if he gets a job this year. I think maybe next year, if things continue to go the way they've been going, that's a more realistic scenario. But here's the other thing you got to remember, folks. Most of the Giants' offense is based on what they ran in Buffalo, what Daboll ran in Buffalo. Now, I'm not saying that losing Kafka is something, that wouldn't be devastating. Don't get me wrong. But it's not like, the development of the offense is going to stop if he were to move on. You've got Daboll. Daboll will probably hire somebody who thinks like him or is on the same page with him. So I don't know necessarily if it would be as catastrophic as some of you seem to be making it to be. Would it be devastating? Yes. Do I want to see it happen? No. But I think they could potentially recover from it if it were to happen. And again, I want to stress that I'm not so sure it happens this year. I think at this point, they're just kind of, teams are kind of kicking the tires, if you will, on Kafka, who is in his first year as an offensive coordinator. And, I don't know if I'm a team, I don't know if I want to hire a guy who's in his first year as an offensive coordinator after, 6 or 7 years as an assistant coach with Andy Reid's staff. I mean, it's a good pedigree, don't get me wrong, but I think I would want somebody with a little bit more experience. Just my take. So we'll see what happens there. All right. Up next, we hear from Bus Stromovic. The Seagulls will have their D ready for DJ running opportunistically. Do the Giants therefore focus more on Saquon run game or more on the passing game? I don't know enough about Philly's defense. Okay, I got to be honest with you. When I saw Seagulls initially, I thought you meant the Seahawks. I've never seen the Eagles called the Seagulls. On Giants Country, we have some articles about the scheme that the Eagles defense runs. We will probably have another one on what they've been doing. What they did the last, in week 18. Later this week. So if you want to learn more about the Eagles defense, I suggest you check that out. As far as the running game, here's the thing. The Giants have set up a situation where it's a pick your poison type of deal. You want to stop Saquon? Great. Daniel can run. You want to stop Daniel? Great. Saquon will run. So it's a pick your poison type of deal. And I've got to think that, if the Eagles come up with a punch, the Giants are going to have a counter punch. What that is at this point, I couldn't tell you, but I'm not as concerned about it. I think the Giants have options. I think the Giants offense is not necessarily a one-dimensional offense where you have to sit there and worry that, oh my God, if they shut Daniel down or if they shut Saquon down, that's it. So I wouldn't worry too much about that unless the Eagles come up with something that is just totally off the charts. So thanks for the question. Up next, we hear from AJ. I am rattled by the coaching interview requests. If we lose OC, DC, or both, how much of the progress is wiped out? Okay, AJ, again, I don't think that if the Giants lose Kafka and or Wink Martindale, I don't think the progress gets wiped out. Next year, the offense and the defense are going to have new wrinkles. It's going to be tailored to the players they have. So I would not worry about it that much. I mean, I know change is scary, but I just don't think it's going to be that huge of a deal. As I said before, with Kafka, he's basically running a lot of the principles that Dable ran up in Buffalo. So I don't think you have to worry too much there. With Martindale, that I could maybe see a little bit more of a concern. But again, any good defensive coordinator worth his weight in gold will tailor what he has to his system will tailor his system to what he has as opposed to the other way around. So I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I'm not as freaked out about Kafka and Martindale drawing interest for head coaching jobs. I mean, good for them. That's what they want. Good for them. I'm more concerned about them beating the Eagles this weekend, if I'm being honest with you. So we'll worry about what happens after that when we get there. But I'm not going to sit here and fret about it too much because there are contingency plans that they can do to, keep the continuity going. And like I said, they're going to add players in the offseason to both sides of the ball. And that could potentially change what they were going to do anyway. So, all right, up next, Satoshi Guakamoto. With the Giants moving to a pass-first offense, Saquon 9 rushes in the biggest game of the year, wouldn't it make sense to let Saquon walk in free agency? Giants can draft a running back in round 2 or 3 and ask that guy to rush 9 times a game. Satoshi, I think you're going about this the wrong way. The Vikings basically clamped down on Saquon. And when he got his runs, he did pretty well with them. So again, Saquon is a unique talent. And where he made his mark in Sunday's game over the Vikings was in the passing game. So yeah, the Giant you can make the argument that the Giants can draft a running back in day 3 at some point, but can you get a running back who can do the things that Saquon can do? So I'm sorry, I'm just not buying that logic. I wouldn't break the bank for Saquon to re-sign him, but I would definitely look to see about bringing him back on a reasonable deal if it could be worked out. So hope that answers your question. Next, we hear from Foreshadow. I get how David Turner feels about Daniel running the ball, but I feel there's a difference with Daniel's decision-making from last year. This past game seemed less design runs versus him either feeling the pressure or play breaking down, escaping the pocket to throw, but runs. Thoughts? All right, I have to think about that for a second. I think what you're asking me is, did Daniel Jones have fewer design runs this game? I thought he had more design runs than just, running away from the pressure. I thought it was the opposite. I don't have the count right now. Probably have that count by tomorrow, which is actually Tuesday when you're watching this. I'm recording this on a Monday night, but yeah, I disagree. I saw it the other way, to be honest with you. And to your point about David Turner not being a fan of Daniel Jones running, I am not a fan of having the quarterback run 17 times. I think that's just crazy. That being said, the guy was hot. They have a weapon. He was hot. He was picking up yardage and moving the chains. And yes, it was risky, but you can't coach scared. And I give credit to Brian Dable for not coaching scared. So hopefully next year you don't see as many runs by Daniel in one game. Again, 17 runs was kind of a bit much. I think it was 17 runs he had. Let me see. Yeah, 17 runs. That's a bit much for a quarterback. Not what I want to see, but they got the job done and they got the W. So that's all that matters at the end of the day. Plus, Daniel didn't get hurt, so even better. All right, thanks for the question. Next, we hear from NY Giants Rock, I believe this is. I think the key to beating the Eagles is to win the time of possession. Do you think we have the horses in the barn to get it done? Okay, I agree with you that the key is to win the time of possession. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a win, because you could win the time of possession and still have like 5 turnovers that the other team capitalizes on and makes short work of. I think the key is to play an error-free game. I think the key is to be aggressive. And I think the key is to, just attack their weaknesses. The Eagles, I go back to the first game, or I'm sorry, the second game, this week 18 game that they just played, and how the Giants backups took it to the Eagles starters. And that gives me reason to hope that maybe, just maybe, this game will be a little bit more competitive than I would have thought at the start of this whole process. If you had said to me that the Giants and Eagles would meet in the playoffs, I might give the Giants a little bit of a chance here, but we'll see, of course. The Eagles are a very good team. They are coming off of a bye. So we'll see. We'll see. The Giants are playing really well these last 5 weeks. So I'm optimistic. Okay, let me see. I think we just answered. Oh, one more. I'm sorry. One more before our break. Neymar Saquon. Do you think the Giants will sign Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley to a contract right before the Eagles game? No, it's not happening. I don't know why you would think it would happen. Those 2 contracts are not going to be easy to do. And they're sure as heck not going to do it before a big game. Come on. Even Joe Shane went back and said it, during the bye week. He said whoever they got done during the bye, they got done, and anybody they didn't get done, they would wait till after the season. So no, not even a possibility. All right, folks, let's take our first break. When we come back, more of your questions on this Twitter Tuesday. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, playing daily fantasy based on player projections has never been easier when you visit prizepicks.com. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they go on to score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you win up to 10 times the amount of your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada, and they offer projections on every sport. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and Prize Picks offers safe and fast withdrawals. Download the Prize Picks app today or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. Don't forget that promo code is Locked On, and that website is prizepicks.com. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we have a Twitter Tuesday. So thank you for tuning in, as always, to watch, or if you're listening on any of our audio platforms, Thank you for listening. Um, Please subscribe. Consider subscribing and liking the YouTube channel if you watch on YouTube. If you are listening on our audio platforms, we also appreciate any subscriptions as well as reviews. It helps me understand what I could do better to bring you better Giants content, how I can improve, and so on and so forth. So, feedback is welcome. Before I get to the next batch of questions, just real quick, for those of you who checked out the show on YouTube, I posted a note saying that I was going to have an interview with Nick Gates on the podcast. Originally, we were going to do it, we were going to tape the interview Tuesday to run that on Wednesday. But because the Giants practice schedule is on a short work week, which means they're going to practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then have a travel day on Friday, Nick and I were in contact. We're going to aim for next week. So if you visit the YouTube channel, there's a post in the community tab. If you want to submit a question for me to ask Nick, I will take a few questions into the interview with Nick when we eventually do it. And I know Nick will do it. He's promised me he would, and he's a good dude. So one of my guys that I love to sit and chit chat with. So all right, let's get back to your questions here on Twitter Tuesday. All right, going to kick it off with Ruben Martinez, who asks, how important has Daniel Bellinger's return from injury been for the office? Excuse me. Ruben, very important. Bellinger as a receiving option, as a blocker, he's been a good player for them. And when you take a good player out of the equation, you lose a little something. So I don't have the numbers handy, but I had done a statistical comparison, especially for the run game, with Bellinger in the lineup and without him in the lineup. And the Giants averaged more with him in the lineup in the run game than they did without him. So that right there should tell you all you need to know about, Bellinger and how important he has been to this offense. So. All right, up next, we hear from Jordan Zemeti. Is there any question as to whether Giants Brian Daboll should win Coach of the Year after this performance? Jordan, in my mind, Daboll is the Coach of the Year. And I'm not saying that to be a homer. I'm saying that because name me one coach that is in the running for Coach of the Year that has done more with less. Go ahead. I'll wait. Anybody have a suggestion? If you're watching on YouTube, put a comment in the box below. Name me one coach that has done more with less. Daboll, to me, has done wonders with this team. Going back to the assembly of the staff that he put together, which, in my opinion, is an all-star staff, to the processes he put in place to keep this team focused and get them believing in themselves and each other, to just how he handles the media, to how he interacts with the fans. I mean, the guy, I can honestly say, he has the potential to have it all. And I think it's just a matter of time before this team goes significantly deep, as in NFC playoff championship, Super Bowl, under his leadership. I really, really feel optimistic about the direction this team is headed with Brian Daboll at the helm. So absolutely, he would get my vote for Coach of the Year if I had one for the AP honors, which I don't. I just have Pro Football writers on votes. So, and he is getting my vote, by the way. So, all right, up next, Bobby. Over under on Jones running the ball more than 10 carries or less. Gosh. I'm going to say under, Bobby. I don't think the Giants are going to want to run Daniel Jones 17 times again against that Eagles defense. I think, the Eagles will probably look to stop Saquon. I mean, every team has looked to stop Saquon, but I don't think Daniel Jones is going to run over 10. I'd be surprised. I really would. I don't know exactly what their game plan is just yet, but I think what we saw in the wild card game is more of a an exception than the rule. So, all right. Next, we hear from Danny, who asks, does Danny Dimes have some of the same intangible qualities that Eli had? Unflappable, doesn't get too high-low, cool under pressure. You know what, Danny? You just answered your own question. He absolutely does have some of the same qualities as as Eli Manning did. Um, and good for him. When I was working on my book, The Big 50, and I interviewed Ernie Accorsi about the chapter on Eli, one of the things Ernie Accorsi said that to this day kind of stands out is, besides the fact that the quarterback can play the game and have the intangibles, can he handle the moment? Can he handle the market? The New York market, I don't have to tell you, the New York market is very, very unforgiving, very tough. And it takes a special type of demeanor to be able to survive in the New York market. Eli had that demeanor. Daniel Jones has it. All right. You have to have thick skin. You can't be picking fights with the media. You can't be picking fights with the fan base. And Eli didn't do that. Daniel Jones isn't doing that. They're like Eli, Daniel is locked in and focused on what he needs to do. And it's paying off for him. It's paying off for the Giants. So absolutely. I agree with you 100%. All right. Up next, we hear from Thomas Kwok. Do you think Jones has moved himself up to the 45 million per year range? After this performance, I'll gladly give it to him, hoping we can get a discount to build a team. He deserves it. Okay, Thomas, I started dabbling a little bit on a contract for Daniel. I haven't gotten that far yet because, as I've been saying all along, when it comes to contracts, draft, free agency, I'm not there yet. I'm too busy with the moment right now, which right now is the playoffs. Once that ends, then I can look at all that stuff and give you, a more educated guess. But one thing I will say, there seems to be a misconception that if Daniel Jones gets 45 million a year, the Giants aren't going to be able to build around him. That's not true. That's not how the salary cap works. And for those of you who might be watching for the first time, some point during the off season, before free agency, I'm going to do a salary cap show. It'll probably be a live show, by the way. Probably have Tana and the dog on with me when I do that show, because I'm going to probably need questions coming in, as well as you guys will be able to ask questions as well. But yeah, I am not worried about Daniel Jones getting a big money contract, 45 million a year. And now, oh my God, they don't have money to build. That's not, because I know how the cap works and how they can do things to make the per year, the APY inflated. And I'll explain that once I finally get a contract together for Daniel Jones. I've started it. I'm not finished with it yet because there are different scenarios and different mechanisms that I'm trying to do to get the number to a certain point. But I will say this with Daniel Jones and his contract. The deeper he takes this team into the playoffs, the richer that young man's going to become. And good for him. Good for the franchise because, folks, this is one less need the Giants have to worry about in the offseason. Probably the most difficult need, I might add, is quarterback. And Daniel showing that he can be that guy, it's one less worry for Joe Shane. So good on Daniel. All right, up next, we hear from Florida Giants, who writes, I continue to be confused about Galladay's role in this team. Had a great block Sunday, a great catch against the Eagles. Is this all he's capable of? What's the issue? Bad attitude, loss of skills. We sure could use best version of him. Some might say that Kenny Golladay isn't quite the fit for this offense. Golladay is a contested catch receiver. Not really a big, I guess, yards after the catch guy. There have also been questions about him not being able to get open as frequently as they'd like him to. And, look, I've said this before, and And I'll say it again. The coaches always say that you have to earn your reps. So if a player isn't earning his reps, if he's not earning a suit on game days, pretty safe to assume that he's not practicing well or he's not demonstrating to the coaching staff that he knows his assignments. Those are usually telltale signs. So, with Kenny Golladay, look, I think it's pretty obvious by the fact that Joe Shane never touched that contract to get cap space. All right. It's obvious they're going to move on from him. So maybe they decided to limit him because they don't want to risk him getting hurt. I mean, it could be any number of things, but, I just never got the sense that Golladay was a fit for what this Giants team wanted to do on offense. And we are seeing that, I think, um, ever since the beginning of the year when he had his chances and, he had drop passes and concentration laps and whatnot. Not to mention, some of the things he said in the media about, I don't have to be friends with the coaches. And I don't know, just things he said. And just you sit there and you wonder if he's saying that publicly, what's he saying behind closed doors? So that's my guess on that. And then the other thing I would wonder is just how healthy is he? There's some people who say that he's not fully healthy. I don't know about that, but I think it's a fair question to ask if he's ever really the same since that hip injury. So, all right. Thanks for the question. Up next, we hear from Pat L, who asks, do you think the New York Giants should sign Odell Beckham Jr.? Nope. I can't believe the question's still coming up. Regardless of what happened, I know there was a video of him on the plane that went viral. Folks, let's move on from Odell. I mean, it was a nice dream. It was a nice, period in time when they had him. Let's move on. All right. Guy's going to be on the wrong side of 30, coming off 2 ACLs, is probably going to want a lot of money. Can we be a little bit more prudent with, how this team builds? I'd rather have DeAndre Hopkins, who, yeah, he's on the wrong side of 30, but I think he's a little healthier. And if he could still give them production, I'd rather trade for him than to sign Odell. I'm sorry. I mean, nothing personal against Odell, but I just don't think, I think that ship has sailed. So, all right, folks, we've got a few more questions coming up on this Twitter Tuesday. We're going to take our final break, and when we come back, we'll answer those questions. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game. And BetOnline doesn't stop there. It's your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including NBA, NHL, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the games start. Hey, Giant fans, thanks so much for making a Locked On Giants podcast your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you local insights you love to the national spotlight with daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traynor, your host. We are answering your questions on this Twitter Tuesday. We have, I want to say, about 7 or more questions left to go. And also, as a reminder, if you sent in a question and it didn't show up on today's show, one of two things happened. Either somebody else sent in the same question and I covered just one, or I got it too late. I got it after I taped the show. So you can always double back and send me the question on Giants Country. If you go to any article on Giants Country, down at the bottom, there are a series of links. And there's a link where you can click on it to send a question to me. So, I usually do the mailbag every Saturday. I think this week, well, yeah, this week I'm going to do the mailbag on Saturday morning, even though the game is Saturday night. So if you get your questions into me by Friday, I can get the articles out and ready to go for Saturday ahead of pregame. So don't get discouraged. Just send them in, and I'll pick them up if they haven't been answered before. So all right, let's get back to your questions on the remaining questions here on this Twitter Tuesday. So we hear from Len J, who asks basically about the assistant coaches outside of the coordinator and whatnot. So he mentioned Tierney, Jerome Henderson, Bobby Johnson, Mike Groh, Andre Patterson, etc. And why haven't they gotten success or credit for the Giants' success? Len, I don't know, but I absolutely agree with you. I mentioned it in the first segment. I think it was Brian Dable put together an all-star coaching staff. This is a staff that is filled with good teachers. This is a staff that has worked wonders with some of these players. As a matter of fact, in Monday's press conference or Monday's conference call with Brian Dable, I asked him about that. I asked him about the process that they go through when they bring in a guy, especially when they bring in a guy that hasn't been with them in the off season or training camp. What is that process? And Dable, was very complimentary of the coaches as well as the players, who of course have to put the time in and the work in. So I absolutely agree with you, Len, that they should get credit for what this team has accomplished. No doubt whatsoever. Okay, Sean K with a question asked about Mike Kafka, and he asks, it seems that Mike Kafka is going to get a head coaching job in the next year or two. Is there an offensive assistant in the building you think can take over at OC if Kafka leads? Would Davis Webb finally make the switch from playing to coaching? Sean, I as I mentioned earlier, I think if they wanted to promote from within, I think Shea Tierney, the coach, the quarterback's coach, would be the most logical move. Would Davis Webb make that jump? Probably not. I think Davis Webb, if he wants to go into coaching, once Kafka moves on, Davis Webb, I think, would maybe need to start off as a quality control coach, or maybe even an assistant, like an assistant quarterbacks coach, for example. So I don't know that Davis Webb is there yet. Does he have the potential to get there and be a coordinator? Absolutely. I mean, the guy is just absolutely brilliant when it comes to breaking down the X's and O's. But you got to you got to work your way up the ladder. And I don't think Davis Webb is going to go from being an active player right to being a coordinator. That's way too big of a jump. So, but thanks for the question. All right, we have another question from Sean K about free agents and which ones do I think the Giants will sign and which one will they let walk? Sean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm not talking draft or free agency until after the Giants are done playing their games. I haven't done the work. I haven't done the research. For me to sit here and just rattle off names, I would be giving you an uninformed opinion, and that's not what I'm here to do. That's not what I want to do. If you're going to take the time to ask me a question, I want to give you as informed an opinion as I can. And I haven't done the homework. So please, please, guys, don't ask me questions about the draft or free agency until I've had a chance to sit down and do that homework. If, God forbid, the Giants get eliminated this week by the Eagles, I'm going to need probably a week or two to get caught up with everything. And I'll probably tackle free agency first and as I get build up with the draft. But there will be a time for us to discuss all that. I promise you there will be a time. That time is just not now. So I'm sorry. But thanks for the questions nonetheless. All right. Andrew G wants to know, how was Daniel Jones able to improve his pocket presence And for next week, thoughts of doubling A.J. Brown with Fabian Moreau and a safety and let Jackson take on Devonta Smith one-on-one. That second idea is intriguing. Haven't thought that far ahead. It's Monday, and usually, actually, I'm going to sit down and do my film work that I usually do on Tuesday, but that's intriguing. Definitely intriguing. I think you would have to bracket A.J. Brown. Absolutely. So I could see that happening. Absolutely. Regarding Daniel Jones and his pocket awareness, drill work. They have done a lot of different drill work with Daniel Jones to help him develop a better feel for the pocket. One drill that I can recall from the OTAs and training camp would be Daniel would drop back in the pocket, and a bunch of coaches or assistants would have like these big padded foam pads, for lack of a better term. They were like cones. And what they would do is they would kind of wave it at Daniel, either hit him or wave it in his vicinity in an effort to get him to feel the pressure around him. So that was one of the many ways I think they helped him with improving his awareness in the pocket, is to create traffic and noise, if you will, in the pocket. And you're right. Daniel has responded very well to that challenge. So, looking forward to seeing what else he brings to the table, as he continues, hopefully, in this offense. Okay. Next question comes from, let's see, Andrew Bogdan. Seeing how other teams have had a hard time containing Daniel Jones when he runs, how do you see Wink game planning to contain Hurts? Andrew, what's interesting about the potential game plan for the Giants on defense, how injured is Hurts still? In the Week 18 game, you didn't see him run very often because, obviously he was nursing that shoulder injury, and I don't think he wanted to take a pop on it. So I wonder if that's going to change. I would think for the playoffs it would, because now it's all or nothing, winner take all, loser go home. And if that is the case, the key is going to be, contain. Don't let him get outside the pocket. Plug the gaps in the middle. Don't give him anywhere to run. It's really that simple. So, I want to say in the first game against the Eagles, Philadelphia was able to really exploit the Giants on the edges because they weren't holding their contain. So I would be careful about that, obviously. I'm a little concerned about Azeez Ojulari not being available for this game and them having to go in a different direction. If they have to play, O'Shane Zimenez, can he hold up on the edge there and protect it? We'll have to see, but that would be my suggestion on how to slow down Hurts if they decide to run him. So thanks for the question. All right, we have a few more here. NY Giants 26. We saw that the Giants clearly saved some plays for the postseason. Is it possible that the bag is deeper and will pull out more special plays for the further we advance? Yes, I believe that. I really do. You go back to Week 18, that whole game was kind of vanilla for the Giants. And I have to think that they suspected that they might see the Eagles again, that there was a chance they might see the Eagles again in the playoffs. I can sit here with confidence and tell you that on Saturday, the game plan ain't going to be vanilla. What they're going to do, I can't say. I mean, I don't know to say, but yeah, I mean, if you're going to borrow something from 2007, remember when they played the Patriots and they kind of held back a few things, thinking that they might see the Patriots again down the line, and they did. Yeah, I think the Giants coaching staff has thought of that. So absolutely. All right. Next, we hear from Jonathan S., who wants to know what kind of difference does sitting in the press box make in doing your job versus sitting at home? What was the COVID year like when you couldn't be at the stadium? And during the game, do the reporters talk to each other or are they locked in on their game and articles? Okay, hopefully I can remember all three questions here. Um, the last question, we do talk. We have, in-depth conversations? No. But, sometimes somebody will say, "Oh, because you're writing, you're looking down at your computer, so somebody might miss a play and say, "Oh, who made that tackle?" Or somebody might not have binoculars and say, "Oh, did you see who missed that block?" So that's the type of conversation that goes on while the game is going on in progress. And then of course, we hang out, we eat together and we hang out pregame, halftime if we're not filing a halftime running report and all that stuff. So yeah, we're not just sitting there like quiet church mice, you know, not talking to one another. The COVID year was challenging. It was challenging because you were now at the mercy of the PR staffs as to which players came to the podium, the virtual podium, so to speak, and which players didn't. You were also at the mercy of whether you got a question in or not. So it was challenging. Um, we made it work, but there were times, I'm not going to lie, where, maybe I wanted to get a question in and I didn't get called on because I had maybe asked two questions before and I didn't get called on for, the next player. So it was kind of a pick and choose type of situation. As far as your first question, which is, I believe it was, what kind of a difference does it make being there in person versus watching at home? You could see the entire field when you're there in person. You could see what's going on the sidelines when you are there in person. The other stuff like, stat service, real-time tracking, information, that stuff you can get anywhere. And we have special services where we get that stuff for the media. But ideally, you want to be on site if you can. It's not always possible if you're, with a smaller paper or you don't have a travel budget or whatever. But ideally, you want to be there. The other benefit, obviously, to being on site, and now that COVID, the restrictions are gone, you can go down to the locker room and you can float around the locker room and talk to guys and get information that maybe you couldn't get during the COVID era. I've done that many a time where I've gone down to the locker room and had side conversations with players, if you will, to find out little things that I file away for later on in the coverage. So I think that's probably the biggest difference. So thanks for that question. That was a different question, an interesting one. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so that was Jonathan. So a couple more questions here on this Twitter Tuesday. Let's see. We have Elizabeth C., who asks, if you were Kafka and Wink, would you leave to coach another team or would you stay? What would Patty personally do? And how much of the offense do you think comes from Dable and how much is from Kafka? All right, Elizabeth, I think most of the offense is Dable. Kafka has put his own, mix into it, but I think most of it is Dable. As for what would Patty do? Here's the thing, Elizabeth. Mike Kafka is what, in his 30s, maybe early 40s, and Wink is what, in his 50s? So I would relate more so with Wink since I am closer to that age bracket. um, here's the thing. Both want to be head coaches, but it's got to be the right opportunity. And I think if you're Wink, you probably say to yourself, I only got one shot at this so far. I got to take it. If it comes up, you can't sit there and say, and go on the interview with the Colts and say, oh, I didn't like it. I'm going to pass because you don't know if you're going to get another opportunity. Kafka, I think, may get other opportunities. There just seems to be more of a preference for offensive-minded coaches than defensive-minded coaches. There also seems to be more of a preference for guys that you will have for a while. So, what would I do if I were Kafka and I were Kafka's age? I would wait until I had the right opportunity. If I were Wink, and I am, like I said, in Wink's age bracket, I probably, if I really wanted to be a head coach, I probably would just gamble on myself and just roll with it. So, two different answers, I know, but you got to take, it's not an apples to apples type of situation. All right. Last question comes from Lawrence D. Considering the Eagles have one of the best tight ends in Goddard, do you think Wink will assign a spy to him? I'm thinking in the personal Landon Collins, or does the two great receivers negate that scheme? Lawrence, I think the key with the tight ends is something that the Giants haven't really done a whole lot of this year. And for the life of me, I don't know why that is. Get physical with the tight end. Stop giving him free releases. See what that will do as far as, disrupting his pattern and his timing with the quarterback. I don't understand why the Giants haven't done that. I really don't. So they got to have a reason for it. What that reason is, I don't know. So I don't think that they will, quote unquote, assign a spy. Usually you assign a spy to a quarterback. Would they assign exclusively Landon Collins to covering Dallas Goedert? I don't think that will be the case. I think it's going to depend on the situation and the package. But like I said, you got to get physical with the tight end. You can't let him run wild with free releases, which is what the Giants have done a lot of this year. So hope that answers your question. That is the last of the questions on this Twitter Tuesday. So I want to thank y'all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed Twitter Tuesday. On tomorrow, I am going to have an interview for you. It's not going to be Nick Gates again, unfortunately, because of timing. Nick, we have to postpone it to the following week at least. But I will have an interview for you. We're going to start an early look at the Eagles. So my guest is someone who's very knowledgeable about the Eagles. Then on Thursday, I have a special treat for you. It is the crossover show, but it is my first crossover show with two hosts. So I'm getting from Locked On Eagles, the co-host Louis DiBiase, who I did the Week 18 show with, and then Gino Camilleri, who I did the first show with. So Louis, Gino, and myself will do the crossover show on Thursday. And then it looks like Thursday night will be Locked On Live with Traina Tana and the dog. You don't want to miss that. So, folks, make sure you keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. We will catch you again tomorrow.